Now I'm going to show you the service layer, how to implement the service layer with the example of a service. In this particular, the register activity, which actually creates an activity. This has several concerns. As you see there, it is related with transactions, so it makes this behavior. So the service layer triggers behavior in the domain. The domain model and interacts with the database, and all these interactions are transactional. So, and basically we try to be ACID, atomic, consistent, with isolation and durability. So what does it mean? It means that all service should be transactional, and I'm going to show you how to say that in GPA. And another thing that is relevant is that persistent objects that are managed in this context should not be sent outside. Okay, and to avoid to be sent outside, you convert them into data transfer objects to the outside. So basically, the goal in this layer is to provide an API for external, so to encapsulate the domain. So basically, it is a facade, okay, of services. So encapsulates the domain model. Provides a set of services, so an API that encapsulates it. This API is invoked transactionally and returns objects that actually are not transactional objects, because that would be a problem, but they are basically only the data. So they are data transfer objects. That's what I'm gonna show you by showing you a service. Okay, so we have this class. This class should be a service class. Okay, it's important to have this annotation. We interact with several repositories. Okay, I will show you why we interact with that. But by interacting with these, we need to get variables, or get instances of the repositories. We use something that this is auto-wired, that is dependency injection. It means that the framework, in this case Spring Boot, is going to generate instances of each one of them for me. And actually this is very nice, because this is an implementation of a creational pattern. You learn about abstract factory, these patterns in object-oriented programming. So this actually is a way to implement a creation. So the creation is delegated to someone else, and this can change. So we'll talk about this in the lectures. Okay, so I declare these, so these dependency injection, these entities, and now I'm going to show you here the service. As I told you, the service should be transactional. Another important thing is that the service does not receive persistent objects. So it does not receive persistence managed by GPA. So look, we are outside the GPA context. So GPA manages persistent objects, but outside the GPA does not rule anymore. So all the values I receive here is pure data. Okay, as you see, activity, so the constructor of activity that we have been working with, yes, it receives objects. So this institution is a persistent object. Okay, but that's in this layer. So in this layer, not anymore. So because I receive this information, look, instead of receiving a user, I'm receiving the ID, the unique ID in the user. So I receive the key that identifies a user in the database. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, I'm going to check that this is not null. If it is null, I'll just throw an exception. But then I go to the user repository and I try to find by ID, user ID. And if I do not, I throw an exception. Look, I have this method, find by ID. So let's look in this user repository. Oh, the method is not there. Why? as soon as you have these repositories, you have a couple of methods that are predefined. So the find by, the find all, of course, as I've shown you, for the activity repository, you have to program to codify some queries, but are not these generic ones. So that's nice because you don't need to program; they are already there. So you do find by ID and you get a member. So a member, and from the member you get the member's institution. So that's this activity is being created by this member. So I'm going to associate the activity with the institution of the member. That's what I'm doing there. And then for all the teams that come in the activity DTO, but it's not teams anymore, because in the activity DTO, I don't have persistent objects. So what actually I have there is IDs of teams inside this team DTO. They are IDs of teams. So what I'm going to do here in this method, get teams, is that I go for each one of them and I get the ID and I try to get it from the database. The same way, I go to the team repository and say, give me the team that has this ID. And at the end, I return a list of teams, now persistent objects, not IDs anymore. And I can do it because I'm inside the transaction. So actually, I'm executing inside the transaction. Then, as I have all the information, the activity DTO, the institution, and the teams, I just invoke the constructor, as I've shown before. And hopefully, any invariant is violated, so an exception is not thrown, and then I can execute the next instruction where I go to the activity repository and say, make this object persistent. And that's it. Finally, because this method returns an activity DTO, cannot return an activity. Actually, it can, but it's not a good policy because it goes out of the transactional context. What I do is that I create an activity DTO by reading the activity information. So this is in the activity DTO, I have this, I receive the activity DTO and I just copy the information. This deep copy institution is just a flag that says how deep I'm gonna copy the information. Okay, and sometimes it's useful because sometimes you don't need to copy all the information to send. So in this case, actually, is being invoked with true. So I'm gonna copy the activity and also the information about the institution of the activity. And that's it.